It's January 28th, late morning. My name is Dennis McKenney. I'm a consulting forester with New England Forestry Consultants. I live in Bennington, New Hampshire. My company is under contract with the City of Claremont to implement the management plan on their forested properties, and the work consists of maintaining boundary lines, handling timber sales, and supervising them from start to finish. Today we're at Moody Park and we're looking at a pile of red pine saw logs that have been harvested from a thinning on a parcel of city-owned land which adjoins Moody Park. These logs will be loaded on tractor trailers and they're being shipped to a sawmill in Canada. My company was selected in 2009 to implement and administer the forest management plan that the city adopted in 2008, I believe. So this is just one of several timber sales we've completed. This active one on Moody Park was timed to coincide with frozen winter weather, so we want to protect the integrity of the roads and trails during the course of the harvest. So we'll take a brief tour of the harvest and look at some of the equipment involved and discuss some of the reasons for the harvest. This is the old ball field on Moody Park itself. There's essentially two different kinds of products that are coming off the timber sale here. There's pulpwood, which is cut to 8-foot lengths and shipped to paper mills in the area, and the wood is processed into pulp and then turned into paper. And as we saw earlier, there are saw logs involved. In this case, we're looking at these red pine saw logs. There's also other species that will come out. There'll be some hemlock, some white pine, and there's this red pine, which is probably going to be the predominant species for volume. This job was put out to bid. North Country Lumber from Littleton, New Hampshire was the successful proposal and accepted by the city. They've been on site for several weeks now harvesting. They've brought in, as you can see in the picture here, some temporary bridge panels and some culvert pipes. So if we have a bad soft spot or a wet spot to cross, we'll use these culvert pipes and these bridge panels to stay out of the running water, and we have a permit from the New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services to cross in those areas. That's a standard permit that we get from them on virtually every job. This is the yard crane. This is used at the old ball field, what we call the landing site. This is used to sort the products and to load the tractor trailers as they come in. This is the main haul road. The forwarder transports the logs and the pulp from the stump out this road to the landing area where the truck picks it up. This happened to be an existing road that accessed an old sand pit on the city property when it was owned by someone other than the city. And it's also used frequently as a hiking trail, since it's adjacent to the park itself. So we've again timed the work to coincide with winter weather to protect the integrity of the road, and we've taken great pains to keep it open so that it will be easily used for hiking in the future. Around the sale area itself, I've posted some signs to alert people to the ongoing activities and tell them to be careful and to watch out for falling trees and falling limbs and moving equipment. I'll zoom in now on this red painted tree. That's the red painted boundary line that marks the boundary line between Moody Park itself and the city's other property. In the course of our work, we've done about 20 or 22 miles of city boundary line in a manner similar to this, the traditional way of marking woodland boundaries is blazing and painting. So in this case we've used red on these trees, and that marks the boundary line itself. The blue paint you see marks the limit of the cutting which will occur on Moody Park itself. Here's more of the boundary line. The pink flag indicates the location of the boundary. That's so that the man who's running the cutter and actually cuts the trees can see from a distance where the line is. And if you look carefully on this white pine tree, you can see old barbed wire fence in the tree itself. This land was used for farmland probably 100 years ago, so these trees are fairly young. This machine is called the forwarder. It goes back and forth from the landing area where the trucks load into the woods, drives around from spot to spot, and picks up the various products. Right now he's sorting out, that looks like a white pine saw log there, so he'll put that in the pile where the white pine is located. He's got some red pine saw logs on there, and he's got some 8-foot pulp as well. So it's a useful machine in terms of sorting products too, because each truck that comes in takes a straight load by product, either red pine saw logs or white pine saw logs or pulpwood. We don't tend to mix the loads together. I should point out too that the city required work be handled by a company that has FSC certification. That's Forest Stewardship Council. So our work here is subject to audit and review by an independent third party, and in addition these products can be what's called in the trade as green certified, meaning they're produced from sustainable harvests under careful supervision and under good forest practices. These logs that you see here, the saw logs and the pulp, are being harvested on a site that was formerly owned by Davis & Simons, which had a large sawmill in Claremont, one of which was at the present location of the Walmart here in town. So timber harvesting on this particular area is nothing new, and as I get a chance when I walk into the woods, I will take some quick video of evidence of the old harvesting and the logging that occurred here. He's going to start piling down the 8-foot wood now. Once he's unloaded, he'll get squared away and go back out in the woods, get another buggy load of wood and bring it back. Some watching this video will be familiar enough with logging to remember when it was done by a scoot, which was pulled either by a crawler tractor or a farm tractor even, or horses as the case may be. And this forwarder is really nothing more than a self-propelled scoot with a cherry picker on it. So the principle's the same, but it's a lot easier on the body. Again, here's our main trail that goes out into the woods for the forwarder to go back and forth on. As I swing over to my right here, here's an area where some cutting has just occurred. You can see the brush is laid down flat on the ground. I'll swing more to the right. Here's a pile of short 8-foot hardwood pulp, and just in front of that pile right here, here's an old stump from probably 40 years ago when this was last cut. I'll zoom out, and this tree with the blue stripe on it, that's the way we designate trees that are not to be cut. That's a nice thrifty young white pine tree, and we want to save that for future harvests. Here's another pile of 8-foot pulp in the woods. You can see that in several cases here the big logs show rot in them. That's likely a result of logging damage from about 40 years ago when these trees were, when this stand was last harvested. So without a strong pulpwood market, there would be no commercial use for these trees. Even though these white pines show evidence of logging damage, I still decided to save those trees. They can still grow well in spite of the damage, and I made the decision to hang on to them for the future. Here's a very large white pine tree here. I've painted a W on that to indicate that we're going to keep that for wildlife purposes. Any tree that we find that has obvious signs of wildlife use or would be of benefit to wildlife, we hang on to those and typically designate them with a W. They might have evidence of woodpecker use. There might be a cavity in them that a fisher cat or a porcupine could use for a den if it was down low, or a cavity up high could be any of the cavity nesting birds we have in the area. Sometimes they're useful for hawk perches, and birds of prey will use them. So if they have evidence of wildlife use or potential, we hang on to those trees. Here's a strip that the cutter has gone through. You can see the wood piled down on the roadside here where the forwarder will come and pick it up. This brush will stay on site. It gets trampled down by the forwarder. These are not hiking trails here, so we've done our thinning work and kept the brush off the active trails. So we're trying to balance out recreational use and the responsible management of the city's forest land. Ribbon up on the trail marker here to alert the operator to its location and make sure it wouldn't get damaged in the process. The X on the white pine behind it, those were trees that I marked and tallied for saw timber. They'll be turned into lumber. Here's our main trail. This has been the existing hiking trail. We're using this also to transport the logs and the pulp from the stump out to the landing area where the trucks load them up. Okay, immediately off the side of the trail, here's a run of white pine logs and pulp, and we're looking down through the area that's been thinned out and then back around to the forwarder trail. We're in the city's red pine stand. This wood is probably 60 or so years old, so that would have made it back right after World War II that this wood was planted. We've gone through the stand, identified the best trees and kept those, and thinned out the trees that are ready to harvest or that wouldn't survive until another 15 or 20 years when we might cut again. You can see the forwarder carefully working in the stand to pick up the wood that's been piled by the processor. We'll see that a little bit later in this video. You can see this white pine stump just in front of the processor, cut off 8 or 10 feet in the air. That was a multi-topped tree that probably suitable only for pulpwood. And there's a lot of wood that's come out of here, but there's a lot of good trees left behind, so it really is best described as a thinning. There was an article in the paper, a letter to the editor, that described the fact that we were clear cutting in the park. That's not the case here. This is not at all a clear cut. This is just a thinning. Hardwood pulp, 8 foot, going on the forwarder. We've got pretty good markets for red pine saw logs. We're able to take these down to about 6 inches on the small end, which is pretty good utilization. Here's our red pine saw logs here. My glove on the end of this 16-foot log will give you an idea of the small end diameter on these saw logs. Here's the paint gun that I use to mark the trees. These logs are sold based on their board foot content for lumber. There's a different rate for white pine than there is for hemlock or red pine. The pulpwood, the 8-foot wood, is sold by weight, so many dollars per ton. So this is a revenue generating operation for the city. It's what forest landowners do to responsibly manage their land. They balance out the finances and the biology. Here's another one of our trail markers here with the pink flag on the top. Again, the blue stripe on the tree indicates that's a saved tree. In between the marker and the saved tree is probably 20 or so red pine saw logs that the forwarder has to pick up. This is the processor. It's just a very expensive axe and saw. There's a hemlock 8-foot piece of pulp, more pulp, and more pulp. Last time this lot was cut 40 years ago, there was no such market around here for hemlock pulp. So he'll cut the tree and grab it at the same time. Now he picks it up, swings it around where he can process it. He clips the limbs off. That machine measures it and cuts it to the right length for the various products. There's a set of powered rolls on there with spikes on them. It can go forward and reverse. And that's what pulls the tree against the knife. That brush is helpful acts like a snowshoe under the machine, especially if we get on any soft ground. Pretty well ground up. Several off, but he's got to strip the limbs off one at a time. More pulpwood. And he'll lay the limbs in his trail. I've gone out ahead of the machine and put a blue stripe on any tree that I wanted him to save. So this is logging in 2013 in west central New Hampshire. Moody Park, Claremont, New Hampshire. So that's my brief documentary about the harvest activities on the city land adjoining Moody Park. There is work planned right at Moody Park, and weather permitting we'll get to that this winter, some of which includes reopening the vista from the picnic site on the top of the hill back towards Mount Ascutney. My mother-in-law, who was born and raised in Claremont and is now in her mid-80s, tells me she has fond memories of going there as a child and having picnics and looking at the mountain. So we'll see if that can come true again. With respect to wildlife, I have seen lots of deer sign on the harvest area, as well as some regular traffic from a fisher. However, I don't see any squirrels and there's no signs of any rabbits. I do think the harvest itself will have a beneficial effect and impact on wildlife. There'll be more browse for deer. There'll be feed down close to the ground for small animals, so we may see some rabbits move back in as we get some softwood to reseed. And there'll be some hardwood sprouts that they can feed on, and that should make the fish happy since they're a predator that eats rabbits and porcupines and other things. So that's the end on a snowy midday, January 28, 2013. Again, I'm Dennis McKenney. I'm a land surveyor and consulting forester with New England Forestry Consultants, and our company handles the forestry work for the city. One last thing I failed to mention. Timber under the New Hampshire Constitution is real estate and therefore must be taxed. So the orange stickers are from the Department of Revenue Administration in Concord. They deal with the timber tax, which in this case the logger has to pay. That's 10% of the timber value. This white sticker on the right comes from the Department of Environmental Services. That's our notification of wetlands crossing in a forestry operation. So if we should have to cross any running water, we'll put a temporary bridge or culvert in and then pull it out when we're done, and we're under a permit from DES that allows that.